Good day, everybody. I have Yolelwa Sikunyana here. Umntu womthetho. That's what my mom would say when she talks about lawyers. But also, on the other hand, an entrepreneur who actually not only is about the law and the interpretation thereof, but about growing businesses. And it's my belief that today our discussion is going to be helpful to those who want to understand how to deal with the crisis that we are in now under COVID-19, and also in our sort of connecting with the government, communicating with government, and using government information to make decisions in our businesses. So over to you to say more about what you do so that we can get on with our conversation.
Okay, brilliant stuff. So my passion, of course, is around the law and how we could navigate our lives and any other roles in the universe, incorporating the law, because I don't believe that we should live in a country or in the world that doesn't have rules and regulations. Whilst those rules could be unfair to some could interpret them as limiting, some could interpret them as very rigorous in their lives. But in essence, for me, it is important to live around rules, principles, things that are understood, why we have to behave in a certain way to preserve other people's interests, not only our interests. So which brought us to this conversation then with you, Coach, to say, what can we do during this period? I mean, if we've got leaders, and particularly our president is leading during this period, how does he communicate what we need to do, how we need to do it, where? Yes.
So as a person who understands the law and the structures, because with me, I'm just a simple coach. I get my power from my clients. So I get to talk about epidemiology, virology, medicine, public health, leading in banks, mining, and all of these things, science, hard sciences and soft sciences, with ease because of the clients like you that I work with. So I look like and sound like and walk like as if I know everything, but I know nothing. I actually depend on people like you to actually make me to look brilliant. Isn't it? It's the easiest job.
That's rich, Coach.
So the first question I would like us to sort of discuss around is just the understanding of governance from a government point of view. We have got parliament, we've got the cabinet, we've got the command council. Just briefly, to a layman, how do these three things work together?
Well, the underlying foundation for every rule in this country or every law is the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. So that's the supreme law, so to speak. So anything that is made by government or is decided for by government will emanate from the Constitution directly. So, however, as citizens, we understand the Constitution to be the supreme law, and we think because it is the supreme law, we can rely directly on it. However, there are other circumstances that requires us to rely to the enabling legislation, being in this particular instance, the Disaster Management Act. So, and the general law, the general application of the law, you don't need to rely directly on the Constitution. So the Constitution is an enabler to say, make laws that are in line with the Bill of Rights. That is how we have got here, is that what is happening, the government has triggered the provisions of the Disaster Management Act, and as such, they've constituted a command council. And this command council is composed of the president and the ministers. And they make decisions empowered by that act. And of course, there will be overlapping issues around constitutional rights, because mostly we have to understand that Section 36 of the Constitution limits our rights, and government has to balance these rights. It's their responsibility to balance these rights. So that's what is happening.
Yeah, and the most important thing that I am actually picking up from what is going on is that we are all learning. We've never been in this situation before. It's the first time in a democratic society or South Africa that government has to exercise these kind of powers. And what does it mean for mistakes, for precision, and all of those things? So what is your view when it comes to these mistakes, and what is expected? How do we balance obligations and rights?
So for me, the issue is that you are correct. You're saying that it's the first time. So it's the first time for everyone. But in this society, we then expect government to step up, because everyone who's employed by the cabinet, I mean, who's part of the cabinet, should be able to do their job, and should be able to foresee that if this happens, how will we react? So it's obvious then to me that because it's the first time, we're going to undergo a lot of challenges. Amongst other things, you say, if I make laws in an ordinary time, I give you time to comment, come back to me, and whatever. But what do I do in a time of a crisis where I need to act quickly? You may not get sufficient time to comment on the law that I'm about to make. But does that mean that you will not be able to follow the law? So all I'm saying is that there are changes when you do things around crisis.
Yes.
It cannot be business as usual when there is a crisis.
Definitely, yes. So this crisis, as we have just unpacked it now, not only does it affect government or the public sector per se, it affects the other three pillars of society. And it's my firm belief that if you are going to move forward as a society, you need to balance out and create bridges between the other three pillars that I'm going to talk about just now. Apart from the public sector pillar, which includes government and government agencies and state-owned companies, you have the pillar of the private sector. And inside the private sector, it's privately owned businesses, it's people in their own personal capacity, and all sorts of other formations like employers formations, business leadership formations. All of these people sit there, and they need to respond, anticipate, and lead their businesses, and not run them down to ground simply because there is a crisis that we are facing. Yes. We also have the non-profit sector. The non-profit sector has also got the NGOs, which are more of an addition to the bridge that needs to be created between the private sector and government. So these NGOs, they close the gaps. They play an advocacy role. They do things that are actually putting government on its toes so that it does not trample on human rights simply because there is a disaster. And then you have the fourth pillar, which is not that well developed in South Africa, but you find that in other countries, it is well developed. That is now the cooperative sector. So in countries like Kenya and other countries outside our continent, and even within the continent of Africa, the cooperative sector is well developed, insofar that you even have the financial services sector playing a role there, where you have got cooperative banks, much more developed than we are in South Africa, which play through putting them up together under the banner of common interest. They are able to, for example, have lawyers have their own bank, or medical professionals have their own bank, and actually finance across for capital requirements, and even simple things like financing vehicles and financing bonds. So that kind of a cooperative sector, also has a role to play under this crisis. So I'm just laying a foundation to say, today, what we are going to talk about is mainly to focus on government. And under the banner of government, we're going to look at communication. And recently, the most recent form of communication, the major that is when the president spoke about the likelihood of moving down from, I don't know whether it's up or down, it depends how you look at it. Moving down from level 4 to level 3 kind of lockdown, with certain relaxations happening. And the kind of feedback right across society to that kind of an address was of utter discontent. People are not happy. They say there was not enough clarity or information with regard to what the president said. What would you like to say with regard to just that part as we delve into government communication?
Yeah, so again, for me, what is the foundation of the government? So for me, it's critical to understand that the powers that are exercised by government are on behalf of the public. So yes, literally, whatever powers that are exercised by them, they are supposed to be for the benefit of the public interest. So for me, that is the foundation. And the Constitution as well, it's clear that, government needs to be transparent. So in the issues that are surrounding government and communication, government should always seek to be transparent and as intentional as possible. Yes. So around the issue of the message that the president gave and ambiguity that is alleged thereof, it is my view then that it will be great to unpack on how government could actually communicate, seeing that they've got, Cyril has a spokesperson, or let me say a communications manager. So around that, what is it that government could utilize to actually communicate more effectively and with an intention?
Yes. Because what has happened, even from the first announcement that the father of the nation wants to call a family meeting, so to speak, as many people refer to these, there was no real explanation as to what to expect without dealing with the content.
Yes.
And I think in law, you have got some funny kind of submissions that you make before you appear before the court. And you call them heads of argument.
That's right.
So those heads of argument, usually, they give a taste of what is at stake here before you actually walk into the courtroom.
That's right.
So how could we create, what would you suggest that the government communications people, this is now not the politicians, but the employed, like the civil servants that are working in the presidents, what could they do to give us a taste of and sort of create a scope for the president's communication so that the kind of confusion that happened a few days ago doesn't happen? How could they actually overcome this?
First of all, we need to compliment the president for being the most humane and accessible president. We are lucky to have someone who's always willing to come out and address us. That's the first compliment. And in view of that, and with the fact that he's a warm person, government staff or government support staff should be able to look up to him and say, okay, we've got a kind of a president that is warm and likes to interface, talk to people. So how can we support him so that whenever he is engaging, people are not confused or people are not complaining? My view is that team that's sitting with the president, then they should be looking at the content. What is the content that the president is going to deliver? What are the risks that are associated with miscommunication or agreements that have been made in principle to say we agree in principle that this is what is going to be communicated, but who is going to communicate it is very critical. Whilst you agree that today I'm going to say we're going to start serving tea, but is it my business to say it? Am I the right candidate to say it? Or I'm going to delegate that to the minister of the kitchen to say that we're going to allow tea. So those are the things that I think they can support the president with. And then in terms of the spokesperson for the office of the presidency, I think she could be the one who goes out there to be the buffer, to say that this is what the president is going to address. You know, this is the intention. Mostly people want to know what is the intention. Because you want to manage expectations. Everyone currently is anxious. So if expectations are not managed, we're going to come to wrong conclusions that there was nothing that was actually said.
We don't want him to be the father or the uncle that calls a family meeting and we don't know what it's about.
That's right.
Exactly. So it's not about the content, it's about the intention.
Yes.
Yes. And they are about, probably, to simplify, I know I'm oversimplifying it. There are probably 3 levels of communication that sit, whether you are in government or in the private sector, in whatever form of organization, there's strategic communication. That's usually, if we're to use aviation, is flying at 33,000 feet. There is not much detail there. Then you have got the kind of tactical kind of communication that is probably flying at the level of a helicopter, where there's a little bit of detail that is being provided. And the lower you come to the last one, which I'm going to mention now, is operational type of communication, where now it says who's going to do what, how are they going to do it, and when are they going to do it. It's very operational. It gives you the detail as to if you're going to make tea for how many people. Are we going to use grandmother's China tea set, or are we going to use the mugs, so to speak?
That's right.
So when the father of the nation comes out to speak, the one who's going to make the tea, he said, but he never said which tea set we are going to use. And then there's discontent there. But all that the president might have been coming to tell the people at the time is to just tell them that there will be a tea party.
That's right.
Be ready, and it's going to be on such and such a day. These are the things that we are taking into account. We're taking into account that some people don't drink tea, they drink coffee. Some people, they just drink water, on and on it goes. So that's the kind of information that is going to set the agenda for the tea party. And then we move from there. Yes, So in the end, for me, there is a kind of a thing that needs to happen. The sweeping that needs to happen before the president speaks, maybe a few hours before, a few days before, to say, these other things are out of scope.
That's right.
Yes. Because if you go back now to this state of disaster, there has been 2 major parts of communication. The first one is the presidential address. The second one is the ministerial address, where the ministers then unpack what is going to happen. And then also the ministers are the ones who then also update us as to whether we are off the mark or we are on the mark on these things. So I would love to pick your brain even further in terms of saying, what is it that we could do as ordinary citizens to actually meet government halfway in the state of disaster? Because communication is not a one-way street, it's a two-way street. I'm sure there's something that we could do, either as the leaders in business or ordinary citizens in this game of communication.
Well, first of all, everyone is frustrated. Everyone is anxious. You know, everyone is irritated. Everyone is disengaged, most importantly. Because I've had many conversations around what's happening, you know, the communication, how government is doing things wrong and all that. But I have particularly noticed the anxiety around what is happening. Not even the government doing anything wrong. But when you are anxious, you need to blame somebody for your anxiety.
Exactly.
Because you can't be anxious alone.
Exactly.
You know? So for me, I'm like, okay, we are anxious, we are irritated, we can't do things. I mean, I'm a business person. I'm not able to operate. You know, courts are closed.
Yes.
But I am literally anxious, and I'm saying, how do we balance this thing? So because of that, there has been a disengagement. And when you are disengaged, you don't want to hear something that you don't like.
Yes.
That's the first thing. So the society at this stage is disengaged. They want to go back to their normal life. They want to trade. And there's all sorts of reports about people being poor and that poverty is going to kill people instead of the virus. So the question is, how do you balance? And the public opinion, of course, is very influential. And we need to understand that. Public opinion is very influential. It can even convict the government itself. But the good thing about Cyril's leadership is that he has been consistent in saying he's got a responsibility to actually protect the entire citizens. He doesn't have the responsibility to select a certain number. And when you argue as a public member, you are not coming from that position. Your job is not to protect people's lives, you know, to limit people's freedom, you know, to limit people's right to trade, most importantly. So all those mixed emotions disengage people, and it's not helping. So what I would suggest for the public is that do not disengage, rather converse. Let's have a conversation that says, if you want to blame government, where did it go wrong? Come and converse. Let's have a conversation. And Cyril has been saying that I am open for people to make representations. I am open for people to submit, you know, and this is the advantage that people don't want to take, but they want to engage in social media everywhere, but they will never engage the president directly by submitting their concerns.
Is it a sign of how young our democracy is? Because many people in the build-up to 1994, they thought that, wow, now we are free. In isiXhosa, they say, meaning like now we can relax, everything is going to be okay. Isn't that a false expectation? That in a democratic society, everybody has to work and everybody has to read and everybody has got to understand policy so that in the end they can be able to interpret and then do the engagement from a position of knowing.
The refreshing thing is that the people who are actually making these conversations have got access, which is why they are starting these conversations. So for me, access means you can engage to the extent that you are informed. And when you are informed, you've got the power to now engage and influence. So I've heard arguments like, okay, I'm arguing here in Sentin, but I'm arguing for someone in Alex, right?
Yes.
Someone in Alex doesn't have access to 1, 2, 3, but you've got access. You are a citizen. You want to influence positively that we need to comply, because the more we comply, the more relaxed the rules are going to be. It is not about defiance. You know, we cannot be in a spirit of defiance, because defiance cannot build compliance.
Exactly.
These are opposites.
There's a thing for me around this word called compliance. Let's take the smallest form of organization and government, this thing called marriage, or even dating for that matter.
That's right.
Do we have to comply there to fit in? Is compliance important?
Well, compliance is important to a certain extent.
Yes.
And the word compliance may sound very instructive, you know, and very limiting.
Yes.
But in a light interpretation and a simplified interpretation is that compliance relates to rules. Do you know
written
the
rules? And unwritten?
That's right. Do you know the rules? Can you follow the rules? Do you understand why?
So in the end, why would I need to comply in this dating game or in the marriage situation? What is in it for me?
Because you know the rules. and you have a chance.
Yes.
You know the rules that it's a tit for tat. It's a give and take. That's the first rule.
So I have a benefit to gain by being in alignment with my partner. So I'm changing the word now from compliance to alignment. So when we are in alignment, even when we go to a restaurant, we look at things, we look at people, and we laugh without exchanging a single word. Because we know what we are laughing about. We know what that person reminds us of.
Yes.
Isn't it?
Alignment.
Yes, there is a kind of alignment that exists between the smallest form of organization of 2 people, and sometimes even when it grows into a family of 4 to 6, that's what you see.
That's right.
Even a first family in the context of the USA. Recently, I watched a documentary on the Obamas. In fact, it was Michelle Obama's book on belonging. On becoming. There, it was fascinating how they were running their family from an alignment point of view, aligning with their history, quoting that they come from a slavery kind of background, and they are not going to entrench slavery with the staff in the White House as they engage with them. They will probably have a much more humane kind of dealing with them. And I want to sort of steer our conversation towards not a compliant society, but a society that is in alignment with its government in the face of the disaster. How do we achieve that?
Well, you see, the issue is around attitude as well. If we agree, if we are aligned, let's use that way. If we are aligned in respect of what is going on, what is it that is going on? If we are aligned that there is a pandemic at this stage, that's tick box number 1.
Yes.
And secondly, if we are aligned that the government now is in leadership in respect of directing us how we are going to survive or how we are going to carry on during the pandemic.
Yes.
That's tick number 2. Then now, the complexity becomes when we say, okay, for government to be able to direct us or to lead us, they need to formulate some sort of rules, more formalistic rules. And this is where now there is no alignment, because the formalistic rules are created from a more democratic and a more constitutional level.
Yes, definitely.
The person who is formulating the rules is directed by the Bill of Rights, mostly.
Yes.
Because there are rights that are conflicting with each other. He needs to balance them. Someone says, I've got a right to freedom. I must move around whenever I want.
Yes.
I've got a right
tobacco business has got a right to profits.
That's right.
And there is nothing illegal about smoking. Therefore, we should unban this thing called tobacco or cigarettes.
That's right. And someone else says, I have a right to trade. You know?
Yes.
And someone else later on, when everything is happening, if the government could say, okay, let's go out there tomorrow, someone else is going to say to government, I've got a right to access to health facilities that are decent, you know, and government is going to be having to balance these rights, because that is what exactly they are doing right now. They are trying to say which rights comes first. Someone's going to say, I've got a right to life, therefore if you can't give me access to healthcare, I'm going to die.
Exactly.
You know? Exactly. So how do you do it now as a leader that you balance all these constitutional rights? Of course, you've got to limit some of them.
Yes, definitely. And the word draconian sort of lurks in the background as I am listening to you. But I want to take us back a little bit to that point whereby the citizens accept that government is in leadership, that government has got their interest at heart. Isn't there a thing called trust there that will be regulating that kind of situation?
A what?
A trust.
Yes.
Can it happen without trust? That thing that you described, that everybody is in alignment with government, and they are in alignment because they've ticked one box. We have a constitution, we have got government leadership, and therefore we need to align because these people that are in leadership have got our interests at heart. And I'm introducing the word called trust, and I'm saying if the trust is not there, it's almost impossible. That's why even in that small organization I was talking about, I have seen situations whereby a private investigator has been hired to investigate the partner because there's no trust that the partner, when he or she walks out the door, are going to actually align with the rules of give and take when it comes to this thing. So in the end, I want to sort of elevate our discussion to embrace trust as a critical element for this big word that we've introduced alongside compliance called alignment.
Of course, trust is the most critical thing in leadership. Of course, when I'm being led, I want to be led by someone that I trust.
Yes.
But at the same time, the person who's leading me needs assurance that I am supported.
Yes, yes.
My leadership is supported because I've got the best interest. And the good thing about the president is that he is keen, to admit mistakes. Even
yes.
on the issue of the mask, the following day, president was laughing about it, and saying that he's going to start a TV show to teach people how to wear masks.
Yes.
So you find it very difficult that you can't trust someone like that. Someone who is out in the open to say, I'm human. I also make mistakes.
Even in the last address, he did mention that mistakes have been made in terms of enforcing the alignment to these regulations.
Yes. So basically, for me, that is an easy person to trust. A person that says, I have made an error, maybe I was not transparent as I should have been, but I'm working under pressure. Sometimes I even close my eyes with my mask. I'm working under pressure, but I'm working under pressure because I've got citizens. So for me, his interest for the citizens is not misguided. It's not misplaced. But he seeks the support because he actually trusts us. But do we trust him? How does the society trust the president that he's acting in our best interest?
So if you have a certain section of the population or a certain kind of group of people in the population who do not trust government, would we then say it is unwarranted, given the history of our democratic governance?
In the first place, Coach, this is my view, is that a part of a society or a society is allowed to have different views. If you say you don't trust the president or you don't trust government, my view then is that be informed as much as possible so that you can articulate the parts where it warrants your untrustworthiness. Where you say
the source of your mistrust.
That's right. You
said you were in a meeting, you were working late, but then when I called the office, they didn't know where you were.
That's right. Exactly. That kind of a source of mistrust. Where exactly? You can't tell me that you don't trust everything. You can't tell me that you believe that none of these regulations are for our good. You need to pick one and say, you see, when it comes to this is why I don't trust government, because 1 minute they say this, 1 minute they say that. Or when I took them to task, they couldn't give me the full story. So the role of the society in disagreeing or mistrusting government is that they should identify the parts specifically where it creates a gap for them.
Exactly. Do you think that we have clothed ourselves with empathy and solidarity as we have been arguing against some of these regulations?
Yeah, well, if there's anything about these arguments, it has shown me that there is a part of the society that fights for certain things. And there is a
Yes.
part of the society that is fighting for the entire wellness of the country.
Yes.
And it is
Yes.
my opinion that sometimes the inequalities are used against the government, when in fact these inequalities were created prior to 1994. In fact, they were always then. We are not talking about inequalities that were created yesterday.
Yes.
So for me to try and engage everyone's opinions on poverty and all this and all that, it is not because there's been regulations or the pandemic that people have become poor. People have been poor for some time. And the inequalities have been here for some time.
Yes,
and of course, it is apparent now that during a challenge like this, which I call a crisis, then these are now in the open. It's not because they were not there before.
Yes.
They are just now in the open because government has to deal with it directly.
Yes, yes. It is very interesting the way our conversation is turning out, because globally, South Africa is seen as an icon of great communication.
Mm-hmm.
All the world bodies and people that matter in the world are actually putting us on a pedestal and saying our government is doing a great job, meaning that we are able to, as government, reach out to different people, give the appropriate information for people to act. But I'm thinking about an African proverb that says a healer is never recognized in their own village.
That's
and
right.
How far is that true for this kind of criticism that is leveled at government?
Of course, and it's very much true. I mean, WHO, sang our praises in respect of how the government, took this and how they are implementing safety measures. And I'm saying for the very first time, I personally have seen people stepping up. Yes, it's not perfect. And sometimes the ministers, when they try to communicate what the president or implement what the president has tabled in so far as the principles are concerned, they may not articulate this well. But in the end, that leadership that the president has shown, for me, it's impeccable. And the fact that we fail to identify it or see it in the country is concerning for me. That why would a WHO person applaud our leadership and we fail to applaud it? Why? Because we noticed some few mistakes or some few things that we are not happy about, and we wipe the entire stepping up, which is something I want to encourage expressly, to say you cannot wipe the entire slate because you made a mistake. Instead of writing an A, you wrote a B.
Exactly. It's a means of an appropriate remedy.
Yes.
And I think in law, you also talk about the sentencing part thereof in the application of the law, that the sanction must fit the crime, isn't it?
That's right.
Yes. So in the end, now, with a small mistake, and then we want to throw the baby with the bathwater, as the English say.
We cannot. And this has been my view entirely, that this country's democracy is one of the quality democracies. Why I say that is that we've got separation of powers in this country. For everyone who has been willing and tabling to take the government to task, they have had assurance that in the process, if they want to approach judiciary, they could. Because judiciary is independent from the executive. And they are empowered through our constitution to make decisions that are not biased. And this is the beauty of this country. But the question is it prudent during a time of crisis to literally, this I would call like a hostile takeover in the corporate world, is that some of the groups want to do a hostile takeover by challenging government in a robust way that is not healthy. All I'm saying is that there is an invitation on the table to make representations, contribute to the committee that is making decisions, and there is an invitation that those contributions will be assessed meaningfully. And until such a time, you are able to come back to us and say, I attempted to make representations and I was ignored. Then you are not in a position to criticize anything.
Yes, yes. One of the things that I've picked up is some of the qualities of leadership that have been lauded worldwide in dealing with this COVID-19 situation. Is that one of the things that is mentioned is being led by science, being led by intelligence. So these two things, for me, how critical are they when, as citizens, we are raising arguments? And also, how critical are they, these two things, science and intelligence? Not intelligence as in IQ, but information. You know,
that's
data.
Right.
Some call it data, but I prefer to call it intelligence because data is just there, it is there. Intelligence has been processed, it's actually ready to make decisions with, you know. So if you are led by these two things, how then should government shape its communication such that it can land well with the intended recipients?
Firstly, Coach, your question is in many aspects, but I will use an example in court. When somebody has an injury, a head injury,
yes,
they will call
yes.
an expert.
Yes,
You
that's good.
To tell the court how those injuries have affected this particular person.
Expert witness.
That's right. And
yes.
how this, and maybe the life of a person will pan out in the next 5 years. Yes. And that is why we are justifying the damages of this nature.
Yes.
And I can tell you now, once that expert has spoken, the court cannot do anything once that evidence has been admitted.
Unless they can produce a counter argument from another expert.
That's right. So they could call a second opinion and say, give us an opinion. But if in principle, that expert says the brain has been damaged, whether it's going to be 5 years damages or 10 years, it's another issue. But the principle is that there is an expert that says this brain is damaged.
Yes.
Or maybe two experts for that matter. They could argue around the time it will take to heal, which is what we are seeing here. Government is in contact, consistent contact with scientists and every expert that they are supposed to be in contact with.
Yes.
But at the same time, the society is reading whatever that they are reading, or they've got their own opinions about what informs this risk-adjusted strategy. It is informed as well by experts. I mean, we've got so many doctors that have been contributing, have been interviewed, and it is clear that there will never be consensus in respect
world-renowned experts.
Yes, and there will never be consensus in respect of the methodologies that needs to be followed. And this is evident in the other countries that we look into. So the other countries have had lockdown today, 1 hour break, you know. So you cannot, when you are writing a thesis, just consult a text. You need to benchmark.
Exactly. Otherwise, it will be plagiarism.
Yeah, exactly. So you need to benchmark and say, okay, before I formulate a view or I take a stance, what informs my view? Is the existing text, which is why I'm saying you can look into South Africa, is no different from any other country. Botswana shut down the country. You know, no one is comparing directly the issues in South Africa with Botswana, with Swaziland. Everyone is comparing South Africa internationally. Yes, I know we are at that level in terms of performance, but no one is bringing it home. No one is saying, oh, Botswana, we actually think you are wrong. Or look at Botswana, look at South Africa, look at Zimbabwe, look at Nigeria. No one is doing that. Everyone is saying, oh, South Africa, you forgot you're not number one. the first class country, don't behave like that. No one is saying, look at next door.
Yes.
There is a benchmark here. These things are informed by benchmarks. They are informed by experts. They're informed, as you say, by intelligence. And information is important. And when you are dealing with somebody who did not assess information, it's very difficult to convince them that you've actually consulted. And this information is supported by science.
So there's a thing that I'm picking up here, that if government could actually hone in and improve on the reasons behind the decisions that it makes, probably there will be more trust that will be gained, isn't it?
Spot on. You actually spot on. And this was going to be my next point to say, whilst we are convinced that there are experts behind the government decisions, we are not seeing the transparency of that reasoning. So this is what we come out to say, this is the team of certain experts and this is their view, around our decision making. And they must come out clear to say, if I ban alcohol, what are the underlying risks methodologies that I have taken into consideration to ban alcohol? And this was supportive with this consultative team of experts. They are supporting us that, for instance, if there are no accidents on the roads or if there is no domestic violence, our wards will be capacitated to take on new cases. Maybe if something like that could happen, and they could select even 10 items, top 10 items that are painful for the society, and then they discuss the science behind them.
Beautiful, beautiful. So that is something that I think would improve that part. But it's a relationship here. It's not about one part going all the way and the other party just sitting back and taking what comes in. Because in order to be aligned, in alignment, it's more like a dance of some sort. So if two dance partners are dancing, they both have to move in unison in certain directions so that there can be harmony.
That's right.
And that harmony would be a display of trust between government and its citizens. There is something that I think we should do also as ordinary citizens to actually ensure that our reasoning is based on science or any other body of knowledge that is important. How can we then improve that as ordinary citizens?
First of all, Coach, we must be informed. For me, information is power. We must be informed. If we've got suspicions, because we can't stop people from having suspicions, if we've got suspicions that the government is thumb-sucking stuff, or is not coming out right, let's seek information directly from the people that are in charge. And then, as the citizens, we need to move our attitude towards alignment. We need to be aligned. We can't work with government if we are not aligned that there is a crisis.
Yes.
Because part of the world and part of South Africans say there is no crisis. Even if we were to get contact or we were to be infected, we will not die. But what is the position of somebody that's looking after everyone, 53 million people? Now, we need to move from level 1 to level 5. Government needs to move from level 10 to level 5. And I believe that it's true transparency. And from our side as society, is true engagement. We have to engage.
Yes. Beautiful, beautiful. We are now getting towards the end of our conversation. And I would just like to ask you to summarize. Because when we started, we talked about the state of disaster. We talked about communication being critical. We talked about trust being a critical part of that consumption of that communication. We also talked about probably a shift from just pure compliance to alignment, using trust as a regulator of that, so that we can be able to do the things that will make the communication to be worthwhile. So I would like to give you the chance to give your summary. What is the thing that you would like somebody watching this video to remember if they just came in 10 minutes before the end of the video?
Well, for me, mind shift is important. So we are talking mainly about leading at a time of a crisis. And I'm saying that because of that, many things are not happening as usual. So the mind shift is critical for us, where we are shifting our minds to support government in something that is not only about us or me and you, it's about the entire country. And I think that is the most important thing, is that this must be viewed as a substance that impacts the entire country. And as such, the issues around regulation and the limitations of rights must be viewed as a mitigating factor. You need to be in a position to understand that something is being mitigated here. And when you are aligned that something is being mitigated, you are able to assist in that mitigation plan by conducting yourself in a certain fashion.
Yes, that's beautiful. That's beautiful.
Yeah. That is my view really about the whole thing, is that until such a time we are aligned that these are mitigation factors and we are supposed to participate purely by conducting ourselves correctly and by getting informed and engaging in the process.
In our next discussion, we are going to be talking about the role of the ordinary citizen within the private sector in terms of enhancing the support to government on the one end, because I say on the one end support, because the other side of the coin is to keep government in check. That's the nature of democracy.
That's right.
So to tell somebody who is free to just support without questioning, they will say, now I have lost my own rights as an individual. So civil liberties have been lost, and now the government is being allowed a free rein to lead without being questioned.
That's right. And that is the crux of democracy. Democracy needs to yield to transparency. There is no democracy without transparency. So government cannot get a one-time ticket to be in charge without being transparent, and at the same time without engaging its citizens.
Yes. Thank you very much. I think this is a first input into a series of conversations that will help leaders like me and you who are entrepreneurs, and leaders like me and you who are in government, and leaders like you and me who are in the private sector or in the non-profit sector, to take certain things into consideration as they engage amongst themselves and with government, to let this country to emerge on the other side of the disaster still intact, with minimal lasting damage. Thank you very much for that. Yes.
Indeed. And in closing, coach, from me is that we need to learn not to be reactive all the time. To sit and position yourself to be reactive is very dangerous, because then you lack so much time to reflect, because you have always been sitting to see that one thing that didn't make you happy. Because mostly reaction is all about you didn't meet my expectations.
Exactly.
But should you have engaged in advance? Should you have prepared in advance that I'm involved, I'm engaged, I'm affected? And I think that's the mindset we need. I am affected, and our co-citizens are affected, and I'm engaged, and I'm not disengaged. I'm prepared to engage, and I'm not going to be reactive. I'm going to be involved and influential in terms of the journey that our government is trying to take.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Yolelwa. And I hope that everybody enjoys this.
Okay, brilliant. Until we do another session again. Bye.
Yeah, all right.